Take a moment to think. When was the last time you truly questioned how you think? Not what you think, but how deep your thinking actually goes. Most people believe they think freely, yet for many, their thoughts rarely move beyond the surface. We live in a world where opinions are loud, information is everywhere, and yet real understanding is surprisingly rare. In this video, we'll explore the highest levels of thinking and why modern society seems stuck in shallow thought. Pay close attention, because the final insight is the most important of all. It has the power to change how you see yourself, other people, and reality itself. We live in an age of unlimited information. Knowledge flows constantly through screens, conversations, and endless content. Yet paradoxically, depth of thought has become rare. Thinkers throughout history warned us about this. When thinking becomes superficial, human potential quietly fades. This isn't just an intellectual issue, it's an existential one. The quality of your thinking shapes the quality of your life. Before we go further, take a moment to support this journey. If this exploration resonates with you, subscribe, like the video, share it, and leave a comment with your thoughts. What you're about to hear may challenge assumptions you didn't even realize were guiding your life. At the most basic level, shallow thinking is reactive. It runs on impulse, emotion, and borrowed opinions. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman described this as fast thinking, a mode driven by automatic responses and mental shortcuts. While useful for survival, this mode dominates far too much of modern life. Social media outrage, tribal thinking, and constant distraction all thrive here. When thinking stays reactive, people become easy to predict, easy to influence, and easy to control. Carl Jung observed that people often prefer certainty over truth. Shallow thinking offers comfort. It provides ready-made answers and familiar narratives. Deep thinking, on the other hand, demands uncertainty. It forces us to face ambiguity and sometimes uncomfortable truths about ourselves. This is why society subtly discourages depth. Depth disrupts convenience. It threatens systems built on compliance rather than awareness. As thinking matures, it moves beyond reaction into reflection. This is where real questioning begins. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea come from? Is it truly mine? Socrates built his entire philosophy on this level, insisting that an unexamined life is not worth living. Reflection slows the mind. It introduces friction. It brings awareness. Many people retreat here because reflection exposes contradictions, fears, and unresolved tension within. But the highest levels of thought go even further. They move into integration. At this stage, thinking becomes holistic rather than fragmented. Emotion, logic, intuition, and experience no longer compete. They work together. Nietzsche described this as the individual who creates values rather than merely inheriting them. The question shifts from what is true to what is meaningful, what is aligned, what creates inner coherence. Society struggles with this level because it cannot be mass-produced. Deep thinking requires solitude, silence, and sustained attention. Three things modern culture steadily erodes. Constant stimulation pulls attention outward, leaving little space for inner development. Martin Heidegger warned that when humanity becomes obsessed with efficiency and distraction, it forgets how to truly think. Pause for a moment. How often do you sit with a thought without immediately reaching for distraction? How many of your beliefs have you truly examined rather than inherited? These questions aren't meant to judge. They're meant to awaken awareness. Awareness is the first doorway out of shallow thinking. What comes next is more demanding, because deeper thinking carries greater responsibility. To think deeply is to see clearly. And to see clearly is to realize that much of what we accept as normal quietly limits us. In the next part, we'll explore how culture, systems, and even education subtly conditions shallow thinking, and why breaking free feels so uncomfortable, yet so necessary. Do you feel society encourages deep thought, or does it reward speed and conformity? As we go deeper, an uncomfortable truth emerges. Shallow thinking isn't accidental. It's cultivated, it's rewarded, and in many ways, it's engineered. From early childhood, education often prioritizes memorization over understanding, obedience over inquiry, and speed over depth. Students learn to give correct answers instead of asking meaningful questions. Over time, thinking becomes performance rather than exploration. Sociologist Erich Fromm warned that modern society produces efficient individuals who think very little. When productivity becomes the only measure of value, contemplation feels like a liability. Silence looks like laziness. Doubt appears as weakness. Yet, every major breakthrough in history came from individuals who dared to pause, reflect, and question what others accepted blindly. Language itself plays a powerful role. When vocabulary shrinks, perception shrinks with it. George Orwell warned that when language is simplified, complex thought becomes impossible. Without words for nuance, emotional and philosophical experiences fade from awareness. Constant stimulation further traps the mind. Notifications, entertainment, and endless content create the illusion of engagement while quietly eroding attention. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi emphasized that deep thought requires sustained focus, something increasingly rare. Without attention, thought fragments. Without continuity, insight cannot emerge. There is also fear beneath shallow thinking. To think deeply is to confront questions of identity, purpose, and mortality. Many avoid depth not because they lack intelligence, but because depth requires courage. Jung noted that people will do almost anything to avoid facing their own inner world. Shallow thinking becomes a defense, a way to avoid inner conflict. But the cost is high. Life becomes repetitive and hollow. People feel busy but unfulfilled, informed but confused, connected yet lonely. Meaning cannot emerge from surface-level living. Meaning requires depth, and depth requires the willingness to enter uncertainty. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your daily thinking is truly your own? Awareness of conditioning is the beginning of freedom. As we go deeper, something even more profound appears. Shallow thinking doesn't just shape society, it shapes identity itself. At higher levels of thought, thinking shifts from accumulating information to transforming consciousness. This is where philosophy, psychology, and spirituality meet. Plato suggested that most people live in a mental cave, mistaking shadows for reality. Deep thinking is the process of turning toward the light, even when it initially blinds. At this level, self-observation becomes central. Instead of being consumed by thoughts and emotions, you begin to observe them. Viktor Frankl described this as the space between stimulus and response. In that space lies freedom. Beliefs are no longer seen as facts, but as interpretations shaped by experience, culture, and trauma. This realization can feel destabilizing, but it's also liberating. When beliefs are seen as constructions, they can be revised. Another hallmark of deep thinking is the ability to hold paradox. Shallow thinking seeks certainty. Deep thinking accepts complexity. Kierkegaard noted that anxiety often arises from awareness of possibility. This is why deep thinking can feel lonely. Nietzsche spoke of the solitude of the higher individual. Yet this solitude is not emptiness, it is space. Space for authentic values and original thought. Emotions also transform. They're no longer suppressed or indulged, but understood. Emotional intelligence emerges from reflection. If thinking shapes perception, and perception shapes reality, then the depth of your thinking shapes the world you live in. Two people can share the same environment, yet experience entirely different realities. Now we arrive at the most important insight. At the highest level of thought, thinking transcends the self. Depth is no longer pursued for ego or identity, but for alignment with reality. This is where wisdom emerges, not intelligence, but clarity. Spinoza believed true freedom comes from understanding necessity. When you understand the forces shaping your mind and behavior, they lose their unconscious control over you. At this level, attention becomes sacred, silence becomes fertile. Insight arises not from constant input, but from deep integration. Society remains shallow, not because depth is inaccessible, but because depth demands responsibility. Society remains shallow not because depth is inaccessible, but because depth demands responsibility. To think deeply is to accept that you are not merely a product of circumstances, you are a participant in your becoming. When enough individuals reach this level, culture begins to shift, not through noise, but through consciousness. So the question is no longer why society is shallow. The real question is this: will you choose depth? Deep thinking isn't reserved for philosophers. It's available to anyone willing to slow down, question honestly, and face themselves. Once you do, life never feels the same. Reflect on this. What does deep thinking mean to you? And what are you willing to release to reach it? Because awareness, once awakened, never fully goes back to sleep.